boundaries are the better way, whether you are attempting to save the relationship you have, or whether you are out there looking for a new relationship, or whether, like a lot of, the people in my lives and my pathways and so on and so forth, you are non-monogamous and you are exploring different types of relationships with different people.
Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Astarte. Today I have as my guest Heather Claus. She has lived an atypical life. She's traveled across the country exploring and teaching about alternative lifestyles and communing with diverse people. All of her experiences thus far have led her to the belief that boundaries are the key to not only saving ourselves, but our relationships. Her new book, Take No Shit, Build Better Relationships Through Discovering, Creating, and Maintaining Healthy Boundaries in 3, sometimes 5 simple steps, is now available for purchase. So go and find that, but not yet. Let's talk to her first. Welcome, Heather.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this.
Me too. It's one of my favorite subjects. And we're actually going to talk about boundaries, particularly in midlife. We'll talk about boundaries in general, but talking about boundaries in midlife is so important. But before we get into all that, I love your background, and I wonder how your adventures in the world led you to the topic of boundaries.
So you might have guessed, I'm a bit of a free spirit, very independent soul. And yet when I was younger and I found myself in a marriage, I was naive in a lot of ways. I did not have the tools to protect myself from boundary pushing and boundary crossing and emotional abuse. I ended up in an emotionally abusive marriage. Mm-hmm. And coming out of that, I had a couple of things that kind of sent me on a path. I spent a year of sort of picking apart what had happened in my relationship and where I lost control of who I was and how I presented to the world and what I wanted out of my life. And little things and big things. In fact, little things often became big things, right? When they weren't dealt with at the time. I don't know about you, but I remember that, don't sweat the small stuff and it's all small stuff. Yeah. And I have discovered that for my life anyway, sweat the small stuff, every bit of the small stuff, sweat it, make a note, keep an eye on it, because the small stuff, if left unattended, becomes the big stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so once I did that, then I went back out into the dating world with a vengeance and explored everything that I had started exploring right before I got married at a young age, and everything that I wanted to explore and didn't get to explore while I was married, and found amazing humans and fantastic connections of all sorts, and realized that the more healthy and strong boundaries I had to protect who I am as I go through this world that is willing to squash people at every single opportunity, and especially in relationships, right? Because we want to give and give and give and give and give. And the more I had, the more I was able to authentically show up for the people I really want in my life and the people I really care about. I have more of me to give when I'm not, as they say, spending, myself with small change on strangers, right? Or, like sailors on leave, as they say, not just, giving everything to anyone who shows up.
Yeah. 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 So you learned the hard way is what you're saying, which we
that was
often
a very long
do.
way of saying I learned the hard way.
Yeah, I've been there, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners have too.
Yeah.
So let's start with a basic. What is your definition of a boundary? What are boundaries to you?
That is a great question. So boundaries to me are the conscious expression of personal power. Everything inside your boundaries. Think of your boundaries as you've got a bubble around you. It doesn't matter how big or how small it is, but that is Rachelistan, right? It's
Like,
and here in Rachelistan is everything that is you. This
mhm.
is the aloe plant that you love, right? This is your podcast that you put time and effort into. And it's also your preferences, the things that you know that you want more of.
Mhm.
Everything outside those boundaries, other cultures, other desires, other preferences, those are not yours, right?
Mhm.
Those are things you want less of or don't want at all, right?
Mhm.
Inside, want more of, can prioritize, want to put effort into. Outside, not my monkeys, not my circus. Inside, my monkeys, my circus,
Right.
right? And I think it's important to note, and I touched on this just a bit, boundaries are not just what you don't want,
Mhm.
right? Boundaries are about what do you prioritize? Who do you prioritize? How do you pick and choose between the literally limitless opportunities that are available to us
Mhm.
and choose the ones that align best with your values and your life and your desire to live joyfully and passionately?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And and so it's not isolating, right? Necessarily. And I think that's a really important point. When people think about boundaries, they think about drawing that line in the sand and you can't cross. And, I refer to it as we want boundaries, not walls, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah. So, okay. So why create boundaries in the first place?
Well, because again, the idea, let's think of ourselves as a fire hose, right? Or as a water main in a city. Are potentially thousands of gallons of water going through. In our case, there are potentially, thousands of possible little sparks of energy
Mhm.
flowing through us. And the boundary is the container that it's in and how much is let out at any given time.
Mhm.
So we all know the importance of like self-care, right? And being able to bring our energy back in and lift our energy up and take good care of ourselves. Boundaries are a form of self-care. They are, okay, I'm going to open this little tap a tiny bit and I'm
Mhm.
going to give this much energy to, I don't know, the barista at Starbucks this morning that pissed me off,
Right.
right? Like this much energy, because also sometimes it's a good thing to just be able to let it out. Okay, crazy girl did this, I'm going to call my friend, I'm going to bitch for a few minutes and then I'm done, right? Like that is also a boundary. I need to get this out of my system and get on with my life.
Mhm.
But also, if you open that tap and the full force of all your energy goes out to that barista and being angry or upset, then what do you have later for that date
Mhm.
or for the lovemaking session that you're hoping to have with your partner or for the passionate work that you do or whatever? So the idea of creating boundaries is not just to say, okay, I don't want any of that. Please, no, thank you. Don't touch me there. Don't call me this. Don't, whatever. But also to say, where do I focus my energy?
Mhm.
How do I maintain the best control over my life? And how do I guide it best in the directions that are most important to me?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that idea that it isn't just a no, it's a yes as well. It's
Yeah.
a discernment and I think of your energy and where you want to apply it, and shifting gears a little bit into particularly women in midlife. This is a time of real discernment and being very, very uh, careful with how we expend our energy.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. Do you see that there might be, or do you think there might be a specific focus or importance about boundaries for women in midlife?
Relationships.
Mhm. Okay.
I mean, really, because once we get to midlife, especially women, femmes, people who are socialized as, feminine, once we get to midlife, we have a lot of us found that what we were taught about giving and giving and giving
Mm-hmm.
is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It's unsustainable. It does not get us the love and the desire and the passion that we want in our lives. And we want more. We want better. We know deep down inside, even though we might question it sometimes because, our brains will go dig, 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 dig. But we know deep down inside that it's out there and we deserve, we're giving everything that we can a lot of the time and not getting back what we need. We're
Right.
begging for what we need, begging for the romance and the flowers and the love and the passion and that spark in their eyes when they see us. And we are trying to offer that to, all these different people or to one person over and over and over again and not getting that back. In midlife, usually is when we're like, I am so freaking tired. I have to try something else. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, boundaries are the better way, whether you are attempting to save the relationship you have, or whether you are out there looking for a new relationship, or whether, like a lot of, the people in my lives and my pathways and so on and so forth, you are non-monogamous and you are exploring different types of relationships with different people.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you are in that, boundaries can help you determine the best uses of your energy and who's going to be able to reciprocate for you in the best way possible.
Yeah. And it also seems that in alternative lifestyles, non-monogamy, boundaries are especially important.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hugely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kink, especially like, in BDSM, when people are talking about power exchange, dominance, and submission, for example, if you don't have good boundaries and you don't know how to negotiate the things that are important to you, you are handing over so much of your life to the unknown. Also, if you're more into, like, I love the psychological aspects of kink. Some people are so super into like the physical aspects, impact play, shibari or decorative rope and suspension. Some people even start to get into things like decorative piercings and stuff like that. And that can be not only really intense. So you need to have like a lot of people, when I have sex with somebody, that creates a bond, right? And it's really hard not to have that emotional bond with sex. Same thing when you're doing like super intense things in kink. And then on top of that, you also add the element of potential harm or danger. Right. And so having your boundaries in place and knowing that you are always there for you. Like I like to say that craptaculous boundaries, I wrote one of the chapters in my book is it's not your fault. Craptaculous boundaries are not your fault. We have been socialized our entire lives, whether you're femme or masc or, identify as neither or both. We have been socialized in various ways to ignore our personal boundaries, to get along with society. Right. It's not your fault, but especially when we're hitting middle age and we want better, it is your responsibility to do for yourself, to give yourself the gift of healthier boundaries to protect your heart and mind and to go out there and show up as your most authentic self for you and for everyone.
Hi, it's Rachel here. If you'd like to dive deeper into your own self-development, but you're looking for an alternative to traditional talk therapy, I think you'll love the Foundation of Self Immersion program. For a full year, you'll get dynamic coursework you can complete on your own time, plus weekly coaching calls and monthly one-on-one sessions with me for personal support. Visit foundationofself.com and click on the events page for more information. That's foundationofself.com. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, and I think that's such an important point, that this isn't a selfish act. That's one of the main positive aspects of boundaries, is that this isn't just for you. It's helping the other person, protect them from your resentment and your passive aggression and your anger.
And your covert contracts.
That's right. Yeah. So you touched on this a little bit. If you didn't know about boundaries growing up, if society, and for many of us, this is true, it's not about you, it's about other people, get along, create community, all of that. So you didn't have boundaries, you weren't taught boundaries growing up. How can people begin to enforce boundaries that are right for them? So I know that's a general question, and I'm sure it's specific to each event, but
it's a good one. It's a good one, though. And I think it can have both a very specific answer and a very generic answer. I'm going to give you the generic answer. So in my book, I list the 3, sometimes 5 simple steps. So the first step is set boundaries. So figure out what a boundary is for you. And usually if you look at your past relationships, I like people to go through, and there's this exercise where you look at either the relationship you're in or your past relationships or both, and you do 2 columns on a piece of paper. One column is, these are the things that have filled me up. No matter how that relationship might have ended, no matter where it is now, what are the things that you can look at and you can say, that filled me up. I still smile thinking about like how in love we were and how much that really made me feel good. Right. And that's usually a fairly short list. And then you look at then you create a list of, these are the things that drained me. And that can be everything from, they were physically or emotionally abusive, to I hated the way they chewed with their mouth open, or like I disliked the way they talked to my mother, or whatever it is, right? That side of things will point towards where your boundaries are being pushed. Why, how it makes you feel. Like those are the emotional boundaries. Your intellectual boundaries, maybe they question your faith or your ability to reason. Like that's a big one, especially with femme folks, right? Like, is that time of the month? Is that why you're being irrational? Yeah. Right. That right there, that's an intellectual boundary. Material boundaries. How did you handle money? Your money, their money, our money. Time boundaries. Did you have enough time set aside for you to be you as an individual, even within the relationship?
Yeah, it's a big one.
Physical boundaries. Did they touch you in ways that were acceptable? Did they stay out of your space? Did they try to, mess with your things? And then, of course, sexual boundaries. How did that go? Because, that's what most people think about when they think about boundaries and consent, right? Is sex. And that's a huge thing when it comes to coupledom. So going through and asking yourself questions and saying, what drained me? And where you're looking at where you're being drained in a relationship, that's where a boundary should be. It's pretty simple. That's like a leak in your energy pipe. You need to patch that with some Gorilla Tape. Yeah. So start there. The second step, say it. So we talk all about how to communicate boundaries. The third step is review it. So you say, hey, I don't like this thing. Your partner says, oh, well, hell, I don't want to do that thing if you don't like it, because we're here to make each other happy. Right. Done. Right. All you have to do with those 3 steps. Your partner says, Oh, no, what are you talking about? That's silly. Like, this thing is like super cool. I like doing this thing. Punches you in the arm again. See how much fun it is to get punched in the arm. Okay, so that didn't go so well. So the review is telling you, okay, I need to potentially step 4, repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I grew up with a lot of physical, aggression in my household, and I don't do well with that. And if you really want to make me neurotic and upset and depressed and anxious, keep doing that thing. But if you want to have a happy and harmonious relationship with me, you will stop punching me in the arm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Right.
that's repeating it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you would watch and see, like, a second review. Does that repetition make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, then there's the 5th step. And the 5th step is change. Mm-hmm. Change your relationship, change what you're willing to accept, change who you are as a person. That is it's entirely, every bit of it is under your control. Mm-hmm. What you are willing to accept from the people around you. Right. And then I also have a chapter on troubleshooting for those slightly more complex situations, like when we cross others' boundaries because we allowed them to cross ours. Like, again, a covert contract. Well, I'm going to let them get away with this because I know later I'm going to bring it up and be like, look what I did for you. And I didn't even want to.
Right. That tit for tat thing. Right.
Hello, me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah. We can all look in the mirror and say, yep, we didn't take no for an answer when we needed to either.
Right.
So.
Right. And again, both of you lose in that situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not what I would consider conscious or intentional. Mm-hmm. But then again, neither is what the people who harm us most, usually. They're not intending to be crappy people. Mm-hmm. They're running the patterns that have worked for them in the past.
Right. And sometimes that does result in them being crappy people and being completely blind to that, which is why the boundaries often are not honored. Yeah. And it's, I'm thinking about throughout my life, and I'm sure listeners are too, like, where have we encountered setting a boundary and it's not honored, and how do we manage that? So having that review that you're talking about, and when I work with clients on this, I call it radical honesty, where you're actually saying that which may not be apparent to the other person. Like, I grew up in a household where there was a lot of physical teasing and I don't like it, and it's activating for me, or whatever it is. And I know that I want us to have a strong relationship, and that's not working for me. That's a really good side topic too, is what makes someone not honor a boundary, if we assume that that the person is not evil, you know what I mean? Yeah. and does care about the relationship. What makes a person not honor a boundary?
So let me be very clear. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. My ex-husband is not evil. And I believe he did love me deeply in the ways that he could at that time. In his case, the things that made him not honor boundaries are his boundaries were not honored as a child. And so he learned these patterns of, letting people, stomp on his and then coming right back and stomping on theirs and sort of pushing. And so we are often taught that relationships are control or be controlled.
Right.
And especially masculine folk have that sort of aggressive control. You see them with their friends, like teasing and actually saying really hurtful things to each other. And I was on another podcast and the guy said, well, I have to know that no matter what I say to this guy, he's got my back if we're like in the middle of something. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yes. And people you don't harm can often like really have your back. But again, this is our socialization. Right. Also, my ex-husband, he had mental illness. Mm-hmm. So, there was that going on. And it doesn't even have to be, a diagnosed mental illness. It could just be trauma from previous relationships. We all come in with our own baggage.
Right. Right.
It can be that, they feel super powerless in their life. And the only way that, they can feel power is to get more of what they want when you don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's when you set a boundary, I feel attacked.
Okay.
And so, like you're telling me when you say, please don't do that, you're telling me I'm wrong and bad. And I feel a need to defend myself and say, no, 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 you have to accept this. This is good. This is part of me, rather than saying, whoa, hey, I didn't know that. So sorry. Will not do that with you. Doesn't make me a bad person to do it with the people it works with.
Right.
It is bad to do with you. Simple.
Right. Taking that judgment away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I found that's the biggest, the biggest hurdle for many people to overcome when setting a boundary is that they're afraid they're going to hurt the other person's feelings. Yeah. So I wonder if you might talk about that for a moment.
Absolutely. So like I said, there's an entire chapter, step 2, say it, how to communicate about boundaries. And one of the first things that I say in that chapter is the last thing you want to say is you've just crossed my boundary, because that immediately puts people on the defensive, right? Like it immediately, they're like, oh, I did a bad thing, right? Boundary is a hugely weighted word right now. So what I like to do is I like to say, like you're in the middle of an argument and things start going cattywampus and you're like, hey, I think we're both getting really kind of worked up right now. And I'm feeling super like triggered and like, upset and tight inside of myself. And I don't want to say things that I don't mean. And, maybe you don't want to say things you don't mean. So how about, we take a 15-minute break, or we take a 24-hour break. And you and I, just for now say, I'm not happy with where this is going. Both of us can say this. And I look forward to resolving this with you in a loving way. And we get on with our evening. Let's pop some popcorn and watch The Equalizer 3 and, enjoy our evening, set this aside. And maybe over the next 24 hours until tomorrow evening at dinner, we can send emails to each other with just points to think about, right? Take the emotions out of the situation and move forward in a different way, right? So come at it from a place of compassion. They are not intending to hurt you, even if you are being hurt. So let's not, this is another chapter. This is the troubleshooting. Do you want to kick a puppy? And most people would say no. And I say, well, why don't you want to kick a puppy? I don't want to kick a puppy. It's not the right thing to do. Okay. Do you kick puppies? No. Right. Like then why do you hurt the person you love? Right. We do it because we think it's okay to harm somebody who makes us feel hurt. But when you stop and think about it, you think about how many times you've unintentionally hurt somebody. Do you want them to lash out at you? And then do you want to be that person doing that to someone you love? Right. And once you get that firmly in your mind, that is never okay to emotionally hurt somebody just because they have hurt you. That's when things start to change. And our compassion in communication of boundaries and other things is able to really flow through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really redirects it to, if you want to change your relationship, you have to change yourself first. And I always say to my clients, there's the good news and the bad news. The bad news is it's all on you. And the good news is it's all on you.
It's all on you. Exactly. Exactly. You have far more, I won't even use the word control, because I like to say the only thing we can control is ourselves, and we do that imperfectly. But we have far more influence with the way that we react and we show up for our partners. And one of the things I talk about in the chapter about change is walk in a different direction in your relationship and live that direction and see if your partner follows you. And if they do, then you've just made positive change. And if they don't, then you know that they don't want to change in that positive way. And you've got additional information.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. So let's make it a little general, and we could talk about people in general, but let's also take a look at people, women, or anyone really in midlife. What are some basic boundaries that people should have? Just general.
Yeah. So should,
I know should is a terrible word.
We always talk about the should shed and shoulding all over.
Don't should on yourself. But let me rephrase it then. How what are some boundaries that are beneficial to have in place no matter who you're with?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is like, that conversation that I was just talking about. When the conversation gets to a point where you're starting to like look for ways to harm each other, you are not collaborating anymore, you are competing.
Mm-hmm.
That is, for me, that's a boundary. I will not be in a conversation where somebody is invalidating me, dismissing me, belittling me,
right on. Yep.
Or making me feel a certain way, even if that's all on me.
Sure.
Like I won't be in that conversation. I will end that conversation for the time being. I will ask for a time out. And if they're unwilling to give that to me, I won't be in a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for me, and this is very meta, I won't be in a relationship with someone who doesn't honor my boundaries. That's a boundary, right? Like, so if I say something like, and I have I have a little book I'm working on. It's a smaller version called Start With No, about when you're starting new relationships and setting those boundaries early.
Yeah.
They say, hey, would you like to go out on Tuesday? I'm not available on Tuesday. But I could meet you next week. Does that sound good? See how they respond to that, because some people really will tell you from the very beginning that they do not do well not getting their way.
Yeah.
Right.
Well.
And if you know that they're going to whine and crank at the beginning,
right,
when you set a boundary, right? Or even if they come at you, hey, beautiful, it's lovely to meet you. And you say, I appreciate the compliment. My name is Heather. I'd prefer that you use that until we really get to know each other. Nicknames and pet names are something for me that is a lot more intimate.
Beautiful.
And
I love that.
Oh, well, I was just calling you beautiful.
Right.
I don't know
so
why
uptight.
You're upset with a compliment, was such a bitch.
Right. Which is gaslighting. And then that about that person straight away, 100%. Yep. I remember when I was in New York City and dating, and I was in my late 30s. And I made this decision after having many failed dates and many, let's just say that the people I was dating really were only interested in one thing. And so, and
which can be fun if that's what you're also interested in.
And trust me, I had my fun, and I was at a phase of my life where I was done with that kind of fun. Yeah. I wanted that fun plus relationship, and I was that's where I was. So I made a boundary, a decision that I was treating dating like a social club. So I'm so happy to meet this human being, right? And but I made it very clear that there would be no sex until we got to know each other, and this was the clincher, that if we decided to have a sexual relationship, I expected monogamy, because that's what I want. So like if we are having sex, I need to know that you are with me and I'm with you, and if it doesn't work, then you can leave. We can part ways with blessings. But at that point in my life, I had spent too much time with the energy dispersing, so my energy, sexual energy, was going to this person that was going over there, and it was going over there, and I was getting really drained. So I wanted to corral that energy. And so I'll tell you, many of the people that I dated, as soon as I said that, never heard from them again. And then I said, thank you, because you saved me a lot of time. Thank you.
That is a perfect response. Thank you. Right. Like that is a perfect example of boundary setting, especially when it comes to dating. Right. and this is one of the things I talk about. I've written a couple of books under a pen name about dating, specifically for like the alternative lifestyles and so on and so forth. And, you know, a lot of what I talk about is the idea that you are not creating a dating profile in order to attract everyone. Right. In fact, you want to create a dating profile that, yes, it's upbeat and it's positive and so on and so forth, but it also allows people to deselect themselves as quickly as possible from your life.
Yes.
Right. And that's what this whole start with no does as well is, you know, I want you, if you are going to have a fundamental incompatibility with me and my boundaries, I want you deselecting as quickly as possible. Yes. We don't need to waste that kind of time together.
Yes, it's like niching your business. You know what I mean? Yes. You want people to say, oh, that's not for me, because that saves a lot of time. I've been married 3 times, so I know I know what it's like to understand the power of that. Yeah. Beautiful. So Heather, how can people find you?
Super easy. my.curiouser.life, my.curiouser.life. That has access to, you know, my social media. It has access to my book, which is now available on Amazon. Take no shit. It has access to the workshop. Take no shit. It has access to my one-on-one coaching for people who are interested in like really getting to the nitty-gritty of how boundaries can improve their lives. And it's got access to, you know, other podcasts just like this, where we talk about boundaries from so many different perspectives, right? And if all you want is to just listen, you don't want to buy a book, you don't want to just listen. Oh, and it's also, if you want to sample my book, there's a pre-publication version of 100 pages in PDF format that anyone can download from my.curiouser.life. And they don't even have to put in their email address. You can just download it, because again, this is a deselect. If somebody reads that and they're like, "Ooh, I don't like her tone," right? Fine.
You know, there's your boundary.
You don't buy the rest of the book. That right. is fine.
I love
but
it.
If you do, then you can join my email list. If you choose, you can buy my book. You can join my workshop. You can do whatever. I want people to joyously select in to what I'm doing.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. So I'm going to have all that information in the show notes so people can know how to reach you. Heather Claus, thank you so much for being on Self Talk. It was a pleasure to speak about boundaries today.
Thank you for letting me. So much fun.
It is. Hi, this is Rachel Astarte from the Self Talk podcast. I'd love for you to send me your emails with questions or stories about yourself. What are you looking for? What are your questions? What are you grappling with in your own personal life that has to do with your identity, with yourself, with your very existence? These are the things that we're going to talk about during the podcast. And go ahead. It's all right. Get deep. I can handle it. So send them to Rachel@selftalkpodcast.com. And I'll see you on the next episode.